Mr. Robot, the fourth and final season. Mr. Robot was created by Sam Esmail, and it stars some dope actors. Rami Malek, who is coincidentally in a new movie that's coming out on HBO Max called, I believe, The Little Ones. That also stars Denzel Washington, Jared Leto, and looks good. But Mr. Robot also has Christian Slater, who's in it, Carly Chaikin, who did an amazing job as Rami Malek's sister on the show, Grace Gummer, which I remember, I believe she was in The Newsroom. That's where I remember her from. B.D. Wong, which played an amazing dual role. And I remember him most notably, at least for me, from the Oz HBO series, where he played a priest, if I remember correctly, for the prison. Here is the official synopsis. Elliot, a brilliant but highly unstable young cybersecurity engineer and vigilante hacker, becomes a key figure in a complex game of global dominance when he and his shadowy allies try to take down the corrupt corporation he works for. It's a dope show, especially if you're into hacking, and by into hacking I don't mean hacking yourself, but just fascinated by it as I am. It has strong characters, beginning with Rami Malek, who is this loner, can't get along with others, socially awkward type of guy that is just a computer mastermind. By night, he's a vigilante hacker and exposes people that are into kiddie porn and shit like that and just doing nefarious shit online. Let me give a shout out to the writers of the show, starting with the creator, Sam Esmail, followed by Randolph Leon, Jeff McKibben, Adam Penn, Amelia Gray, Ted Cooper, Robbie Pickering, Courtney Looney, Kyle Bradstreet, Cor Adana, Kate Erickson, David Iserson, and Lucy Taylor. They did a fantastic job, in my opinion, with closing out the series. The pacing didn't feel off. It seemed like they still cared about the show. It didn't seem rushed. They answered a lot of unanswered questions, mainly the main one of what the fuck is going on with Elliot, which I'll get to in a bit, spoiler alert. Because if you're a fan of the show, you know that he goes to a psychiatrist and he has this schizophrenic type of disorder where he pictures his dead father as still being alive, but only he can see him. And then later we find out that it's actually, he was diagnosed with a dissociative identity disorder, DID. But early on, we know there's something psychologically going on with him, but don't know exactly what. At first, we think that character of Mr. Robot that he created of his dead father, a representation of his dead father, was a real person. Then we realize that nobody sees him except him. Then throughout the series, second and third season, it blends between Mr. Robot and him being one and the same. And by the fourth season, it's kind of what the fuck? He has some mental health issues, but we don't know exactly what. And they definitely answer that question in this fourth and final season. I also appreciated that they had a lot of flashback scenes, and they gave the background story or took a deeper dive into the background story and history of certain characters, like White Rose's character played by B.D. Wong, for example, who plays I don't think you could label as transgender. Maybe gender fluid would be the proper term to use, because he switches back and forth between being a man and being a woman, being dressed as a woman, speaking as a woman, going by the name of White Rose, and running his underground, the Dark Army, which is this underground hacker group. And then by day as a businessman and head of an enterprise of the wealthiest and most powerful men in the world. And we get to see how White Rose became White Rose. He was in love with another guy back in the day when he was younger, and the guy was being forced to, marry a girl because it wasn't, safe for either one of them to be out. And on his wedding day, the boyfriend / lover is in a room, and they're contemplating, running away together and stuff like that. And they're in a room during the wedding reception that's going on. And he says he can't live that way and winds up slitting his own throat. And as he does so, his blood splatters all over these white roses that are there in the room, hence the name White Rose. And then from there on out, White Rose's character, who is in this like powerful position in government, leverages that and, you know, goes forward and honors the memory of her partner by, you know, pursuing to dress like a woman and stuff like that, and is like hell bent on this idea that you kind of get trickles of throughout the whole series of if she thinks she can build a time machine or go into this alternate reality or undo the past and make it so that she can be with her partner again. It's like something along those lines, but kept like covert. Then Angela in this season, which is the like love interest of Elliot's, winds up dying, getting killed towards the beginning of the series. I think it was like the first or second episode. And her we know now father, which is the CEO of E Corp, the company that Elliot works for, kind of sort of looked the other way and let it happen. And the father is one of these people that is like in bed with White Rose's organization, which again is this like group of rich and powerful folks that really run the world. And that was like a, you know, powerful, dark thing that happened. Elliot's character, in my opinion, as these things are going on throughout the series, you see his character unravel more and more. And he begins to like disregard his own code and his sense of morality at times, in terms of like taking more risk to accomplish like the goal that he has to steal all of the money of all these powerful folks and give it to pretty much everyone else in the form of e-coins, which is like this show's version or this world's version of like cryptocurrency, for example. And it's like ubiquitous. It's everywhere in this world. But to that end, you know, he gets like sloppy along the way, is what I'm getting at. And there's actually this very suspenseful episode where he's like running a hack that's like central to this like bigger plan idea in a building known as a virtual realty. And then he, to save his sister who's helping him out on this, winds up darting out of the building after completing the task at hand, but almost getting caught by the security in the building. But by that point, the security had already called the cops. So it was either get arrested or try this. And he darted out of the building, and it ensued in like a foot race, followed by, you know, the cops getting in cars and calling backup and stuff like that, and just like chasing him throughout the city. And that was a super suspenseful episode. I thought it was like really, really well done. Oh, you know, there was this other character called Vera, played by Elliot Villar, and his character was dope. He was like in earlier seasons, and then wound up like popping back up in this one. He has a couple of dope scenes with Elliot that are just like intense and captivating. Like he's a really captivating actor, and he like drew you in when he was having like these dialogues and like long monologues in a couple of episodes, with a dope story that he tells about a bully growing up and how the bully wound up getting like dealt with, and he was the guy that dealt with the bully, or he was actually the bully, I forget which. And Mr. Robot winds up calling him Dominican Psycho, which I thought was pretty cool. Shout out Dominicans. But it was like a play on like American Psycho and the fact that he was a Dominican drug dealer on the show. And we see like the ending of a lot of different character arcs. For example, Tyrell Wellick's character, which was a key character throughout the series, he winds up leaving himself for dead by choice in a selfless act to allow Elliot to continue, which is very against what we would expect from Tyrell Wellick, who to this point was always just like a selfish character. You have a sick breakthrough in a forced psychiatry session that, you know, Vera winds up kidnapping Elliot's psychologist, and then Elliot, and like forces them to have a session because he wants to get some information out of Elliot to see like what angle he can use to have something over on Elliot, and then force Elliot to work for him to some capacity. In this forced session, it comes out that Elliot was really molested by his father when he was younger, and that's why he's so hell-bent on being this vigilante hacker that outs people that are into like kiddie porn. And that definitely explained a lot, but was also an extremely intense scene. Like that was like a jaw-dropping type of scene for me. They introduced this character that's part of the Dark Army in this season, you know, working for White Rose's underground organization, and she's like a taxidermist, and she is a creepy, sadistic bitch. Her name is Janice, and she was played by Ashley Atkinson, and she like befriended the mother of Dom, the FBI agent that was recruited last season and like forced to work for the Dark Army, but she's kind of sent to like make sure she keeps Dom in line because she's like bordering on trying to out the Dark Army. And that relationship finally ended with Dom and Darlene, Elliot's sister, being held by this taxidermist lady and a couple of goons to try to locate Elliot's location, try to find Elliot's location. And if not, they're, going to kill him. And the taxidermist lady stabs Dom in the chest while, she's tied up and everything. So she's like wheezing on the floor. And, she's very calmly explaining, she has about 24 minutes or something like that to live. That wheezing sound is the sound of her lungs collapsing, but she can live off the other one for X amount of time, blah, 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 blah. Trying to coerce Darlene to give up the location of her brother. And then Dom is able to, in a very badass move, yank the knife out of her chest, even though she knows that'll just like speed up and exacerbate her inability to breathe, if she doesn't get medical attention like ASAP. After that, she like uses it to, I believe, cut the taxidermist's, one of the guys is like Achilles, and he falls to the ground. Then she's able to grab his gun and she like shoots the lady dead in the head and kills the other two guys. And then they call an ambulance, etc. So it was like a badass way to get out of that scene and save herself and Darlene. What else? Another character we see White Rose lose control towards the end of the season. Someone that is so obsessed with time and controlling time and in control of everything throughout the entire series. She completely loses it, or he rather, because he was dressed as a guy at this point, and had a meeting with the E-Corp CEO, aka Angela's father, who by this point was in cahoots with Elliot to overthrow White Rose and like her plans and her ideas and shit. But he wasn't aware that Elliot was planning to also steal all the money, etc., and redistribute it to everyone else. But White Rose completely loses it, and as they're leaving a meeting, winds up shooting him in public. There weren't that many people around, obviously, but, because it was nighttime, but it wasn't public on the stairs of a building. So we see that character arc of a character that's like always in control take a complete 180. There's a few cameos throughout the series, but definitely in this season of New York 1. So shout out to them. I watch them like almost every morning. It's for those of you outside of New York and that maybe actually don't have Spectrum cable because it's specific to Spectrum. New York 1 is like channel 1 and it's like the all-day news channel. So that was pretty cool to see. Then there's a really interesting scene where White Rose and Elliot sit to talk. They meet for the second time ever throughout the series, and each sees the other as the one that wants to destroy the world, while each sees themselves as the one who wants to save the world, which is very ironic, and like the juxtaposition between the two characters, and just that interesting dynamic of, hero and villain. Like the villain doesn't see him or herself as the villain, they see themselves as the hero. They just have a different purpose, and vice versa. The hero doesn't see themselves as the villain, they see themselves as the hero, even though from the other person's perspective, the other person is the villain or the hero. So then by this point, White Rose says that she activated this machine, which has been like the secret project that she's been working on all along, and kind of alludes to it being able to set things right, and that she's not, people that have died are not really going to be dead anymore, and kind of alludes to like parallel worlds and shit like that, and then winds up shooting herself. And while the machine is active, there's like a nuclear meltdown in this place. Then all goes dark, but Elliot like comes to. And then things like switch up without real explanation. And by switch up, I mean Angela's alive, and her and Elliot are in a relationship. They're actually engaged. They're about to get married. Elliot doesn't have a sister named Darlene anymore. He doesn't have a sister. He's an only child. His father's alive. His mom's alive. He has like a lot of friends. E-Corp, where he used to work, is actually now F-Corp. White Rose is alive, and she's like this philanthropist. Elliot is, instead of an employee, he is the CEO of a company named Allsafe. The guy Tyrell Wellick, who's the CFO and tapped to become the CEO of E-Corp, is now the head of F-Corp. And it's like a parallel universe, a parallel reality. And Elliot is like, what the fuck is going on? But at the same time, he's like, wait, did White Rose actually build some sort of fucking machine that created this new reality. And it's like almost as if everything negative in his life from before turned positive. And everything positive, like the only real positive thing that he had in his life, which was Darlene, his sister that always stood by his side, she wasn't in his life anymore. And, then Mr. Robot, that like split personality comes back and he's telling him, he's seeing that he's getting into this world and he's going to marry Angela in a day or two. And he's just like kind of sort of going with the flow because things are so good. And Mr. Robot like reminds him, he's like, yo, this isn't your life. This isn't your world. What are you doing? And, he's in his apartment, but then another Elliot shows up, like another one of himself. And he looks at him like, who the fuck are you? And why do you look like me? And like, he ends up like knocking him out and stuff like that and trying to like steal his identity or just play it off like he is the Elliot of this, timeline. And actually, before he knocks him out, he like sits down with him and like speaks to him and finds out that Elliot, the new one that just walked in, he says that when he's bored, he creates people in his mind. Like he makes drawings and he like creates different characters in his mind. One of which was eerily similar to the Elliot that we've been following throughout this entire series. Then our Elliot, the one that we've been following, winds up knocking out and killing the other Elliot, which plays to the point I made earlier of him no longer really having like a moral compass. And from his perspective, then, things are going to be great after that. He has his family back, minus his sister. He has the love of his life back. He has this perfect cookie cutter world where he's the CEO of a company and everything is going great. And he somehow wound up in this parallel reality through that machine that White Rose created. But then from this point forward, then what is really going on begins to reveal itself. And it's a really interesting, dope twist that Sam Esmail went with. And it's that our Elliot, the one that we've been following throughout this entire series, wasn't the real one. The real Elliot is the one with that like cookie cutter life and that walked in and was like, who the hell are you? And that confessed that he kind of like makes people up in his mind and stuff like that. And that Elliot has this like mental health issue where the Elliot that we're watching is one of the personalities that he actually has made up in his mind. And Mr. Robot is another one. And then we find out that there's two other ones. His mother, one played by his mother, and then one played by his younger self, which kind of have like recurring kind of like flashbacks throughout the series. But each of these personalities are figments of his own imagination. We as the viewers were just watching through the lens of one of those split personalities, which is super interesting. And as like a version of his therapist, Krista, breaks it down to him in the show, he has this dissociative personality disorder, and he created Mr. Robot as like this protector type character. And the Elliot that we follow throughout the series, as well as the young Elliot and the mom, and we realized then that we never really knew the real Elliot. But that Elliot that we knew thought he was the real Elliot. And then we see him have like this quick arc of having to become okay with that. And then coming to the realization that he is okay with being one part of these like four split personality, dissociative personalities that make up the real Elliot, which then allows that real Elliot to be stable and move forward with his life. It's kind of a bit of a mindfuck. But yeah, man, it's a good show. I really enjoyed it. If you think that sounds like something you'd be interested in, obviously feel free to check it out. It's a USA show, but all seasons are available on Amazon as well. If you're an Amazon Prime member, you can stream them all for free. It was a fun watch for me. I'm personally into shows that are, well, I'm into different types of shows, but I was into this show in particular just because of the characters. Like, it was very character driven, especially Elliot's character was like really deep and complex, and I really enjoyed it. So shout out to Sam Esmail and the team that was able to put this one together. That is Mr. Robot. Check it out.